Welcome to another episode of Business with Passion. Each show features guests who have transformed their long-term passion into a successful business. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton Roth. My marketing strategy business grew from my love of talking with passionate business owners. In this series, I share their passion with you. So if you're looking for inspiration to enhance your business passion, keep watching.
My passion is for three things combined: circus, theater, and music. I even have it on my business card. I was 14 when I learned how to juggle, and I always mark that as an important moment. I'm not sure it was really a passion then. It's hard to say when you're 14, there's a passion. Well, not necessarily juggling balls, if I can be clear on that. But it was the first thing I could actually do. My dad was a physicist. My brother became a biostatistician. My mother has a degree, is a PhD in sociology. My grandmother and grandfather were lawyers. Smart family. And I'm a kinetic learner. So finally I found something I could do. I learned to juggle in a few minutes and could do it. The nice side effect was that girls would watch me juggle, which was news also. And when you're 14, passion, then it starts becoming more interesting. So I don't have any claims that there was like an artistic passion at that moment, but it felt good. I mean, I felt it in my body, and it was so nice to be able to do something, especially something my big brother couldn't do. That's important. In the 70s in the Bay Area, there was just this real explosion of arts, especially circus arts and theater, dance, partly because, for those who remember back that long, we had some government support. There was CETA funding, for example. So 1974 becomes a seminal year where Dell'Arte Company starts, really coagulates. The Pickles start, Make a Circus comes here from England, really exploding of arts here. And so as I start watching the shows, I go to see Bill Irwin and Jeff Hoyle. I go see Don Forrest and Joan Shirley and Michael Fields and at Dell'Arte, start to get excited about these things. And then there were little places you could take workshops. So I could come and take a workshop with Larry Pizzoni and learn some of the circus skills. I could watch Bill Irwin rehearsing, that kind of thing. Then Bill Irwin is a really important figure because when they did Three High, that's they being Jeff Hoyle, Larry Pizzoni, and Bill Irwin, all of a sudden they went into a theater with circus skills, and we were going, "Ooh, interesting." And then Bill does Regard of Flight, which was this totally different meld of circus, clowning in particular, music and theater. And it was brilliant. It made him famous in New York, and we lost him. We didn't lose him. I saw him a few months ago, but he moved from here. But that really left us a real ambition then. Oh man, is my work cutting the way that work's cutting? And that then so when you get that artistic ambition, then it starts to set in. In 1978, I got invited to join the top juggling group here, the Bay City Reds. The Flying Karamazov brothers were the number 2. They were coming up. When I started performing a lot, so early mid-70s into the 80s, and then I was full-time professional. I was lucky because my mother is a visual artist, really supported me. My brother was going to get his PhD in statistics, and she supported that, and her other son was becoming a professional clown. Great. And so that was nice. And there was this group of folks. I was sort of the youngest of a generation. Bill Irwin, Jeff Hoyle, Joan Mencken, they were all ahead of me. And so I got to kind of race behind to try to keep up. I always was a good juggler, and that was my entree in. And then I learned the acrobatics. I'm big, and I could fill a role in the acrobatic world. And as I started to learn to act, mainly from J.L. Wiseman. I also went to Dell'Arte School. J.L. was my mentor past that to get that education, and started to work in the small theater scene here, which is wonderful. I mean, there are 400 small theater and dance companies in the Bay Area. Some of them very small, some of them large. So there was a whole world here, so you could make that your life. I also started touring. You have to tour. And I always loved the adventure of touring. I toured to Eskimo villages. I've been up to Alaska 10 times, and that's bizarre and interesting to be out in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta in the middle of winter. Worked with a horse-drawn theater company in British Columbia, so I was on a horse 8 hours a day for a summer. Been to Europe a few times, been to Japan, so I liked that part of it too. Sometimes maybe at the detriment of the career, but not at the detriment of the life. It's a nice life. Early on, I loved performing, but I thought that directors were where it was at. And then I directed a show at Make a Circus, and I really didn't know what I was doing. Because I had this idea that directors had power. You move people around. You don't. You're the one person who has no power because you're not there as the show runs. I didn't understand there's this whole courtship and dance that you do with actors, hoping that they might do what you think to do. So that bombed out pretty bad. And now, many, many years later, I've come back to directing and understanding it not as the place of power, but as more of an organizational place, a place where you can do the give and take, and I now enjoy it a lot more. I also produced early on. There was an idea. I never liked to wait for someone to call me, which is the position many actors find themselves, and circus performers. I'm a little restless for that. So I made a company with two friends of mine, Vaudeville Nouveau, that we had through the 80s, and we had to learn everything. So we had to learn, I was the bookkeeper. I've got a lot of books, but I don't know how to keep books. So we would hire someone to do the books with the caveat that I had to look over their shoulder. And that worked very well. We learned a lot. We learned how to do grant writing. We learned what a nonprofit corporation was, a general partnership. We learned the business. Well, right in the middle of this, we were playing at the Goodman Theater in Chicago with the Flying Karamazov brothers. We had done one show, a huge success. The next show we did, not such a success. And the head guy there was kind of talking to me, maybe thinking of grooming my group to be the next one. They come up. But he was an interesting guy. He had a kind of combative way. One of the things he sort of threw us a sop was, hey, why don't you do a big festival here, all you new vaudevillians, that's what we were called. Come do a festival here. Well, I got out of the meeting and I was talking to Avner, the eccentric Avner Eisenberg, an old friend, and he said, that's a good idea, but don't do it here. Do it in San Francisco. And I was young enough and stupid enough to think, well, yeah. So I started this new vaudeville festival here with Sue Ann Hirschberg and Larry Eilenberg, and many good friends explained why it will never work and how we shouldn't do it. And they were right, but it did work. It was hugely successful. And wow. So, but I didn't love producing. And I've produced a lot, but it's not something I loved. And there is real power in producing because you got the money. And you are, you're filling the slots. But it's hard, and it's very hard to produce and perform at the same time. This benefit I was talking about that we did yesterday, I direct the thing, my wife produces it with some other parents, and then I am also the MC, and then I also do acts. And to shift the gears is hard. The nose is not 100% right, but it's close enough to play with. And I bet Paoli or Peggy will know it's close. Your face can take it big like that. It might just be that it needs to be horizontal a little more. Yeah, just a little bit. But I like the mustache.
That's kind of fun, huh?
Yeah.
Especially if I go like this.
Gewalt. My business now is mainly the Clown Conservatory at Circus Center. Started in 2000, and it was not my idea. I get credit for it a lot because I run it, but the then executive director at Circus Center was writing a grant to the National Endowment for the Arts, and he thought that starting a clown school would be a good idea. He called me. I said, I don't think it's a good idea. Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Clown College had closed in '97. I taught there the last few years. I didn't think it was a great idea to close it. But it was what was, and I wasn't sure there was this real need for clown training. I learned catch as catch can. Clowns traditionally have learned by being there with other clowns, which I happen to think is still a fabulous way to learn. But I said I would write the artist, and we got this grant. We got $20,000 from the National Endowment for the Arts. I still didn't start the school. I said, let's do some workshops, test market. I just don't know. I don't know if there's enough jobs out there, and I don't know if there's enough people interested. But people really flocked to these workshops. We packed them out. A guy flew in from South Africa for one of them, which kind of rang a bell in my head. So then we started a small 10 hours a week for a 6-month training period to get started. And I learned from one of my students, who's a professor, about how to write a syllabus. I really didn't know these things. I attended a physical theater conservatory and learned on my own. And so over the years, I've really learned how to build a school with a lot of help from Dell'Arte School, our sister school. So we build the infrastructure. Now we have 18 hours a week of classes. We have very structured homework situation. They write reports, and we are trying to find, in a conservatory setting, what that means for clowns. Clowns are very idiosyncratic. A lot of people think you can't train clowns. We're the only one in the country.
The theme of the week is simplicity. And I purposely put that in knowing that we will want it to be complexity. That's what we'll have. But for good clowning, we got to get down to simplicity. On Sunday's shows in Alameda, John Gilkey came at the last minute, and he was trying a new intro to a very old piece. And in the first show, he had a little stool with 3 balls on it, and a little another to this, and a microphone, and his coat rack, and everything. And he worked out a whole thing with the clowns who were doing the transitions, and it worked okay. For the second show, stool's gone, balls are in the pockets, simplify the transition. That's how we work. We go from more to less, more to less, more to less. So just keep that in mind. We do go from more to less, but most of the notes I'll give you are probably, let's see what less is.
A lot of people think you can't train clowns, which is not true. But don't tell anybody, please. You can't train idiosyncraticness. You can't make somebody more interesting than they are. But you can teach the stylizations, the framework, the craft that lets that live large. You can teach that. You can also allow that creativity to open up. Yo-Yo Ma, who's one of the great creative artists and musician, you think about him, you can't make a Yo-Yo Ma. It's coming out of him, you see it in his face, you hear it in that music, you see how he wraps around that cello. But he had to do scales like everybody else. So that's, we teach the scales, and we try to make the room for the yo-yo and the yik-sak to come out and blossom. And that's a fabulously creative endeavor. It's so much more interesting than teaching workshops, which I still love to do. But to take on the challenge of, nope, I'm going to see you through not just the year, the second year, but the whole career.
So it's here, and then, other arm. And then the logic is, I'll hold this down, right? There's a logic build here, okay. I know where this is going to go, so I'll, okay, right? Humanist machine, but you have to follow that logic. So I think if you do this straight up, not try to get fancy with it, the fun is when he sits up, he's got that little look to us, so now we know he's playing games. So now we got the wonderful thing where he's the number 2, you're very sincerely trying to help him out, and he's messing with you, and then he gets that. That make sense?
So it's not at all a coincidence also that I started the school when my older son was about 2 or 3 years old. Obviously, you want to stay home. That touring, the going off to the Eskimo villages becomes much less appealing when you have a baby to take care of. I get to perform enough now. I still work independently, so I perform with Cirque du Soleil from time to time. So I get to be in the big arena. I also perform in little things, and I direct shows, I write shows, and it keeps me flowing, keeps me fresh, so I don't get, you can get a little sour in the classroom. The Clown Conservatory has now 101 graduates, like the Dalmatians. This is a good year for that. And we have a range of students from 18 years old to 50. We have people more and more from theater programs. They already have a degree in theater. They took a clown class. They saw a particular circus or clown, and I got to do that. Sometimes from dance programs. We had a student who was on Stomp, and she came back for training, went back and worked with Stomp. And then we have some who have circus training. They've worked with Circus, Smirkus, or a different youth circus, maybe done some street performing, and are finding that the skills aren't getting them where they want to go alone, and because we also teach a lot of skills. So we have that. We sometimes take students who have no circus, no theater, no performance training. Because clowning is idiosyncratic, we can take a student who don't know where they're going to fit, but they got a little something going here. Let's go. And we've had some students do very well who come in without much training. You do have to get the training. One way or the other, you got to get it, because you can't work as a professional clown without a lot of skill and a lot of training. We also work here within Circus Center, and at Circus Center we have students of all ages, from little kids to people in their 70s doing flying trapeze. And they work on flying trapeze, they do pole climbing, trampoline, other aerial equipment, lots of acrobatics, juggling, German wheel, many, many things. And it's great to be in that environment, because the clowns a lot of times don't know circus very well. They come in with a knowledge of theater, or they come in with a knowledge of dance, or even those with the circus skills, maybe it's a specific area. So we teach them about circus, and then they just have to go to the next room and see what we're talking about. The students are constantly getting work. They work locally. We have lots of shows here. And students are going off. They'll go to Germany to work in the German cabaret. They'll go to Cirque du Soleil. They'll work with different people. They'll work at Cirque. Some of our students help create one of their big shows, and then come back and tell everybody, oh, this is what that's like. That cross-pollination is wonderful. The fact that we have here at Circus Center lots of studio classes. You can just take the class. It's an a la carte. Any level. We have pros coming back for a little training. We have people who've never done it come in. And then they can see what's happening in the conservatories. About 70% of our students find work in the field. Some of that's teaching, some of that's performing in theater, some of that's working in puppetry, and a lot of them are working in circus. Given the circus, theater, performing arts isn't, it isn't a solid career. You always have to be hustling. The joke I make with the students is, it used to be, a generation ago, you expect to have a job, and you expect to have that job till you retire. Now, no one thinks that way. I say, everyone came to us. They finally realized. And not that we've ever loved it that much, but it does keep you on your toes. It keeps you dynamic. In countries where they have more subsidized arts, and we're very jealous of them. We'll look at France, we'll look at the Netherlands, for just a couple. Those artists can grow in ways that we can't, because we're always hustling. On the other hand, there is something we bring to the table that has a certain energy and a certain cross-pollination and a certain always having to make the most of your resources, which is valuable. So whenever I work internationally, I try to remember that, especially if we're being skunked by the skills somewhere. When we were in China and in Nanjing, the first American clowns, the first Western clowns, ever to be invited by the Chinese government to come teach. And these acrobats who we were teaching, they had a lot to learn about clowning, and they learned. But the skill level in the acrobatics was stunning, and I had to not make sure I didn't get out there and try to keep up, because this whole 50-year-old body would, oh no! So we do have something to bring in that way. I would love it if we had more funding, because you're always scrambling at the bottom. You can't build. We try to make the most out of what we have. On the other hand, it's really important to see what we have, which is we're always getting a lot of influences. We're always working hard. When I first started the Clown Conservatory, I tried to think of how I actually learned and how my career actually went, rather than just repeating what I got from my teachers. And that a lot of teachers do this. It's a very important process. It's hard. And one of the things I thought about was how being on the road got old. Every night you're making community, you hope, with the audience, and then they go out into the streets, into the cafes and the restaurants, and you go back to the hotel and watch HBO. And I talked about this when I was with the Pickles, with Diane Wasnock, my partner of many years, performing partner for many years. And so for us, having some community to relate to was crucial. So I always, from the very beginning, included a clowning and community section. Luckily, in the decades since we started, an actual professional form called social circus has really grown up. So you have Cirque du Soleil, Cirque du Monde, you have Clowns Without Borders, you have the Clown Care Unit out of the Big Apple Circus, which has been around for nearly 3 decades. They're all doing the same thing. They're saying, how do we take these wonderful circus skills that are based on connection and making a group of people feel more than they have felt? Whether it's laughing together or going, oh, when you see the acrobats, or just feeling the teamwork of a company. How do we use that in settings other than the ring and the stage? In the same way that clowns relate to an audience and have a dynamic partnership with an audience, I always try to think business-wise how I can have those dynamic partnerships. Now, it's the buzzword, but those of us who've been freelance artists for 30 years, we know you have a partnership with the Alaska Arts Council, you have a partnership with Del Arte, you have a partnership with this theater and this circus and this teaching gig. I was an artist in residence at the University of Nebraska for 7 or 8 years in their diversity program because I had some Jewish-themed theater material. You love those partnerships. The ones that work, you groom them and keep them going. So I continue to do that in my personal business, and I also for the Clown Conservatory. So our Alice in Wonderland show, we partnered with Active Arts Theater, a children's theater that works in the East Bay. The artistic director had applied and gotten into the Clown Conservatory a few years ago. She was so good, she was working already. Now she has a baby. She's the artistic director. What a great partnership. My plans for the Clown Conservatory are to keep, of course, churning out new clowns. We're also here at Circus Center working on a Circus Conservatory to try to make sure that the clowns get longer training, for one thing. Right now we're a 1 + 1 year training. 1 year with an advanced, get invited to the advanced. 3-year would be great to get the skills. Just deepen into the skills, circus skills, dance, mime, the juggling, acrobatics. And maybe even aerial skills and some odd skills. Clowning is ferocious. It'll take on any of that. So we want the clowns to have the opportunity to get deeper into those skills. We also would love the acrobats, the aerialists, to get some more clown training because the really successful acts, like out of our Circus Center here, we have Vertical Tango, Sam and Sandra. Their act is very high skill level. It's a tango. It has passion and love, and the movement quality. Sandra's a dancer, and it has so. It's not just a display of superhumans. It's real humans doing superhuman things, and that's important. So that, looking to the future. Also, we're looking internationally. We're looking to China. We had one workshop in China. We're going back again. Some more students will be able to come to China. Obviously, there's a huge circus tradition in China. Our trainers here, Liu Yi, Xiaohong, Shakamin, are Chinese, and I've trained in Chinese acrobatics. They've brought a lot to us. How can we bring some of the clowning back there? What's the international form? And now we're again in tune with the government, finally, where this idea of soft diplomacy, the idea of international connections, the idea that the United States can be the leader because we're multicultural. For so many years, we've been looked at as the place where racism has lived and haven't figured out multicultural. But we look at South Africa and look at the turnaround in an instant there. We can look at ourselves and look at this turnaround in this instant where suddenly international, which is what circus has always been, suddenly that can take on a deeper meaning. Right here we have trainers and teachers from Russia, from Quebec, from Paris, of course from Nanjing, from China, and from America. And Liu Yi, our artistic director, made a wonderful speech in a meeting the other day talking about, I don't want to hear Chinese acrobatics anymore. We're teaching American, which includes China and Russia, France. So that's a great idea. And it's a very American idea. And I always like to say, I always like to think, what do we have to offer? What do we have to offer as a clown in business? What does business have to offer in clowning? What do I, as Americans, who have not been at the top of the circus world, as performers, what do we have to offer? Money is always the topic that artists talk about. It's a sad truth, but artists get together and talk about money. I'm sure bankers talk about art. No, probably they don't. So if money were no object, I do love training clowns, and I think I would continue that. I also love making shows, and making shows is expensive and risky. And so I would make more shows and experiment more. I also, arts education is very important to me, and the lack of it in California I find criminal. And I have 2 children, and so it's more criminal to me. So I would spend more time looking at how professional artists, teaching artists, teachers, students, parents, businesses, all make a circle and a cycle that helps everybody. I do a benefit every year with my wife. The professional artists who volunteer their time always thank me at the end and say, you're going to bring me back, right? You're going to bring me back to work your butt off for free. Yes, I think I managed that. Of course, the students get the arts programming, they get the show. So there's not a zero-sum here at all. And it's bringing arts to the center of community, which in America, since we started, has been patchy at best. We haven't got that idea that culture and art can make life better if it's right in the middle there. And it's not art or money. It's not right. Artists can deal with money. We do it all the time. We're not the flaky artists. That's an old idea. We know how to make the most of every single dollar. We haven't seen that many. And business people have art.
Thanks for watching this episode of Business with Passion. If you'd like more information about Jeff Raz, other shows, or perhaps to be a guest on a future show, go online to tv.manygoodideas.com.